The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue over the city. But inside the bank, the atmosphere felt cold and clinical. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls seemed to close in on me. My heart raced as I walked towards the counter, clutching the worn folder against my chest. Each step felt like it echoed louder in my ears, amplifying my anxiety. I had spent the entire day running between hospitals, filling out forms, and making desperate phone calls. Now I was here, hoping that someone at this bank could help me secure the funds needed for my mother's surgery. Clara, my mother, was lying in a hospital bed in a coma, her life hanging in the balance. The surgery she needed was expensive, far beyond anything Grandma Grace and I could manage on our own. The bank's interior was filled with the soft hum of conversations and the clatter of keyboards. I approached the counter where a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose was diligently working. Her name tag read Linda. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need help. My mother, Clara, is critically ill and needs an urgent surgery. We don't have the money for it, and I'm desperate. Is there any way the bank can assist us?" Linda looked up from her desk, her expression shifting from professional detachment to concern as she took in my disheveled appearance and the folder I was holding. "I'm so sorry to hear about your mother. I'll need to get you in touch with the bank manager. He might be able to provide the assistance you need." Linda gestured towards a small office at the far end of the room. I nodded and slowly made my way there, each step feeling heavier than the last. The door to the manager's office was slightly ajar, and I could see a man seated at his desk, reviewing some papers. "Mr. Davis," Linda's voice called out gently as she knocked on the open door. The man looked up. He was in his late 40s, with graying hair at the temples and a face that showed signs of both wisdom and weariness. "Yes, Linda. This is Emma." Linda introduced me. "She's here regarding a very urgent matter. I think it's best if you speak with her directly." David, the bank manager, gave me a nod and motioned for me to come in. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, feeling the weight of the folder in my hands. David's gaze was kind but serious as he took in my appearance. "Emma, please have a seat," David said, gesturing to a chair in front of his desk. "What can I do for you?" I sat down, my hands trembling slightly as I opened the folder and spread out the documents. "My mother, Clara, is in a coma. She needs an expensive surgery urgently, but we can't afford it. My grandmother, Grace, and I have been trying everything we can, but we're running out of options. I don't know where else to turn." David glanced through the papers, his expression unreadable. His eyes then fell on a small, delicate pendant that I wore around my neck. It was a locket that had belonged to my mother. "Where did you get this?" David asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "This locket, my mother gave it to me before she fell ill." "Why?" I asked, puzzled by his reaction. David's face went pale as he studied the locket more closely. This locket. I used to know Clara. We were close a long time ago." I watched as a mixture of recognition and sadness washed over David's face. He set the pendant down gently on his desk and looked at me with a deep, troubled expression. "Emma, I had no idea. Clara was an important person in my life once." His voice faltered, and I could see the internal struggle on his face. "I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I can't imagine how hard this must be for you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized that David's connection to my mother went beyond just professional. "Can you help us?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Please, anything you can do." David took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Let me see what I can do. I'll review your documents and find a way to assist you." As David began making calls and arranging the necessary paperwork, I felt a glimmer of hope amidst the overwhelming fear. I looked at him with gratitude, knowing that our situation was dire, but also realizing that, in this moment, we had a chance. This chapter sets the stage for David's emotional journey, and the connection between him and Clara, leading to the pivotal moments in the following chapters. The following morning, the bank was quieter, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous day. I sat in the lobby, waiting for David to return with an update. My hands were still trembling from the previous day's stress, but I clung to the hope that something would come through. David emerged from his office, looking more composed than he had the day before. He approached me with a warm, reassuring smile. "Emma, I've reviewed your documents, and I'm working on a solution. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." We walked into a small meeting room off to the side, where David gestured for me to sit. He sat across from me, his expression thoughtful. "I've been reflecting on our conversation," David began, his tone more personal than before, "and I can't shake off the feeling that there's something familiar about your situation." I looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" David paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "There's a detail from yesterday that's been on my mind. The locket you're wearing." I nodded. "Yes, it belonged to my mother." David leaned forward slightly, his eyes searching mine. "This might sound strange, but that locket, it's a piece of jewelry I gave Clara a long time ago. It was a gift from me to her." I was taken aback. "You knew my mother?" David nodded, his gaze distant. "Yes, we were close once. We lost touch many years ago, but I remember that locket. Clara always cherished it." A silence fell between us. The revelation left me stunned, and I could see the depth of David's emotions reflected in his eyes. "David, I never knew she had such a connection with you," I said softly. "I had no idea." David sighed, rubbing his temples as if trying to clear his thoughts. "Clara and I had a complicated past. We went through a lot together, but life took us in different directions." Seeing that locket brought back a flood of memories. He looked at me with a mixture of regret and resolve. "When I saw that locket, I realized I couldn't just stand by. Clara was important to me, and so is her family. I want to help." I felt a rush of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, David. We don't have many options left. Every moment counts." David nodded. "I'll do everything I can. I'm going to liquidate some of my assets to cover the cost of the surgery. It won't be easy, but it's the least I can do." I was overwhelmed by his generosity. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose or make things difficult for you." David shook his head. "No, Emma. It's not an imposition. I've been carrying the weight of my decisions for years. Helping Clara is something I need to do, both for her and for myself." As we talked, the door to the meeting room opened, and a middle-aged man with a graying beard walked in. His presence was commanding, and he looked at David with a mix of curiosity and respect. "David, is everything okay?" the man asked. David glanced at me and then back at the newcomer. "Frank, this is Emma. We were just discussing a sensitive matter." Frank extended his hand to me. "Nice to meet you, Emma. I'm Frank, David's colleague." "Nice to meet you, Frank," I replied, shaking his hand. David turned to Frank, a serious look on his face. "Frank, I need your help with something. Emma's mother, Clara, is in urgent need of surgery. I'm arranging the funds, but I need your assistance to expedite the process and handle some of the logistical details." Frank nodded, his expression sympathetic. "Of course, David. I'll get right on it." As Frank left the room to start working on the arrangements, David turned back to me with a reassuring smile. "We'll get this sorted out. It may take a bit of time, but I promise we'll do everything possible to get Clara the help she needs." I felt a wave of gratitude and hope wash over me. "Thank you, David. You don't know how much this means to me and my grandmother." David's expression softened, and he placed a comforting hand on mine. "It's the least I can do. Let's focus on getting your mother the care she needs. We'll make sure everything is taken care of." As I left the bank that day, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead was still uncertain, but David's recognition of my mother and his willingness to help provided a glimmer of hope in the midst of our crisis. This chapter deepens David's personal connection to Clara and sets the stage for his commitment to helping Emma and her family, highlighting the emotional weight of his past and the impact of his decision. The days following David's revelation were a whirlwind of activity. With the weight of his past driving him, David threw himself into ensuring Clara's surgery could happen as quickly as possible. His dedication was evident in every action he took, and Emma, though still fraught with worry, found a glimmer of hope in the midst of the turmoil. David's office became a hub of frenetic activity. Early one morning, I walked into the bank with a mixture of trepidation and hope. David met me at the entrance, his face set with determination. "Emma, I've made some progress," David said, guiding me to a small meeting room. "I need to update you on what we've arranged." Once seated, David laid out a series of documents and financial statements on the table. His usually composed demeanor was replaced by a visible urgency. "I've decided to liquidate some of my investments and sell my car," David explained. "It's not an easy decision, but it's necessary to ensure we have the funds needed for Clara's surgery." I stared at him, overwhelmed by his sacrifice. "David, are you sure? This sounds like a big deal. You're giving up a lot." David nodded, a mix of resolve and vulnerability in his eyes. "It is a big deal. But seeing that locket, remembering Clara, it's made me realize how much I owe her. I need to make this right." His determination struck me deeply. "I don't know how to thank you enough. This means everything to us." David shook his head. "There's no need for thanks. I'm doing what I believe is right. I'll also be working with Frank to expedite the process and make sure everything is in order." Just then, Frank entered the room, carrying a stack of files and a laptop. His demeanor was professional, but there was a compassionate undertone in his voice. "David, I've started the paperwork for the fund transfer and coordinated with the hospital," Frank said, setting the files down. "We should be able to move forward with the surgery as soon as the funds are secured." David turned to me, his voice firm yet gentle. "We're pulling out all the stops, Emma. I want you to focus on being there for Clara. I'll handle the rest." Frank glanced at David with a raised eyebrow. "I've heard you're also selling your car. That's quite a sacrifice." David chuckled softly, though his eyes were serious. "Yes, it is. But it's a small price to pay compared to what Clara means to me." As Frank and David discussed the logistics, I felt a mixture of gratitude and relief. They were moving mountains to ensure Clara received the treatment she desperately needed. I took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of hope as I prepared to face the next steps with Emma. Later that afternoon, I visited my grandmother, Grace, who was anxiously waiting for news at home. I could barely contain my excitement and relief as I shared the updates with her. "Grace, you won't believe it," I said, bursting into the room. "David's going to cover the cost of the surgery. He's liquidating his assets and even selling his car to make it happen." Grace's eyes widened, and she sat down heavily in her chair. That's incredible, Emma. I can hardly believe it. How did you manage to find someone so generous?" I shook my head, still in awe. "It's not just about generosity. David has a deep connection to Mom. He's doing this because he feels it's the right thing to do." Grace's expression softened with a mix of relief and gratitude. "Well, it seems like a miracle. We have a chance now. We need to stay strong for Clara." I nodded, feeling a new sense of determination. "Yes, we do. We're going to get through this. David's making sure everything is taken care of." As the days moved forward, the surgery was scheduled, and the preparations were set in motion. David's commitment and sacrifice had ignited a spark of hope in the midst of our desperate situation. The road ahead was still challenging, but with David's help and the support of my grandmother, we faced the future with cautious optimism, ready to fight for Clara's recovery. In this chapter, David's decisive actions and sacrifices highlight his commitment to helping Clara. The dialogue between David, Frank, and Emma underscores the emotional and logistical complexities involved in their efforts to secure the surgery, setting the stage for the upcoming challenges and emotional moments. The morning of Clara's surgery dawned with a mix of anxiety and hope. The hospital was a sterile, bustling place, filled with the sounds of beeping machines and hurried footsteps. Emma and Grace arrived early, their faces etched with worry, but also with a glimmer of optimism thanks to David's unwavering support. Emma and Grace waited in the hospital's sterile waiting room. The space was filled with muted colors and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. The room was nearly empty, save for a few scattered magazines and a couple of other families in various states of anxiety. David arrived, carrying a large coffee for Emma and Grace. His face was weary but determined. He set the coffee down on the table and sat beside them. "Morning," David said, his voice calm despite the evident tension. "How are you holding up?" Emma looked up, her eyes tired but hopeful. "We're doing okay. It's hard not to worry, but we're trying to stay positive." Grace offered a weak smile, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's been a long night." "We're grateful for everything you've done, David." David nodded, taking a seat and leaning forward. "It's the least I could do. I want to be here for you both." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Emma glanced at the clock, her anxiety rising with each passing minute. David noticed her distress and reached out to her. "Emma, try to stay calm. Clara's in good hands. The doctors are highly skilled, and we're doing everything possible for her." Emma nodded, squeezing David's hand. "Thank you. It means a lot to us. We've been so overwhelmed, and your support has been a beacon of hope." Hours felt like days as they waited. The clock seemed to tick slowly, each minute dragging on. Occasionally, a nurse would come in, providing updates that were brief but reassuring. Finally, a doctor in scrubs approached the waiting area, his face serious but softened by a kind smile. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Ms. Emma," the doctor said, "the surgery went well. Clara is in recovery now, and we'll be monitoring her closely for the next few hours." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Is she going to be okay?" The doctor nodded. "The surgery was successful, but it's still too early to predict her full recovery. She's stable, which is a good sign. We'll keep you updated on her progress." David stood up, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Thank you, doctor. We're very grateful." As the doctor left to attend to other patients, David turned to Emma and Grace. "I'm so relieved to hear that Clara made it through. Now we just need to be patient and supportive as she recovers." Emma managed a weak smile, her eyes still reflecting the strain of the past few days. "Thank you, David, for everything. We couldn't have done this without you." Grace looked at David with heartfelt gratitude. "Your kindness has made all the difference. We'll never forget what you've done for us." David waved off the praise, his demeanor modest. "I'm just glad I could help. It's what anyone would do in this situation." The next few days were filled with cautious optimism. Clara's recovery was slow but steady. David continued to visit, offering not just financial support, but also emotional comfort. His presence was a source of strength for Emma and Grace, and his own life began to shift in profound ways as he confronted the realities of his personal situation. One afternoon, as Clara lay resting in her hospital room, David and Emma sat together in the small waiting area outside. Emma broke the silence, her voice tinged with gratitude. "David, I don't know how to express how much your support has meant to us. I feel like we're finally starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel." David looked at Emma, a soft smile on his face. "I'm glad to hear that. Seeing Clara get better is the best reward I could ask for." Emma nodded, her eyes reflecting the fatigue and relief of the past few days. "I just hope Clara continues to improve. She's so strong, and I know she's fighting to get better." David placed a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. "She's got a lot of people rooting for her. That's got to count for something." Grace joined them, her face showing signs of weary relief. "I've been thinking about what's next. Once Clara's out of the hospital, we'll need to figure out the best way to care for her at home." David nodded, his expression thoughtful. We'll work through it together. For now, let's focus on her recovery. We'll handle everything else as it comes. As they sat together, the atmosphere in the room was one of quiet hope. The immediate crisis had passed, and while there were still challenges ahead, the support of friends and the dedication of David had brought a sense of relief and unity to Emma and Grace. Their journey was far from over, but the bonds forged in this time of need would prove to be a source of strength as they moved forward. In this chapter, the emotional and practical aspects of Clara's surgery and recovery are explored. The dialogue between David, Emma, and Grace highlights the impact of David's support and the challenges they faced during Clara's recovery. The chapter sets the stage for further personal changes and developments in their lives. The weeks following Clara's surgery were a blur of recovery and adjustment. Emma and Grace focused on Clara's rehabilitation, while David continued to provide support, both emotionally and financially. However, as Clara's health improved, David found himself facing a personal crisis of his own. David's home life had always been a source of stress. His marriage to Laura had long been strained, a fact that had only become more glaringly apparent in the wake of his recent efforts to help Clara. The emotional weight of the situation had forced David to confront his own unhappiness and the deep-seated issues in his marriage. One evening, David sat in his dimly lit living room, staring at the framed photos of his family that lined the shelves. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Laura entered, looking tired but determined. She had been distant lately, and their interactions had become more routine than meaningful. "Evening, Laura," David said, trying to keep his voice neutral as he set aside a stack of paperwork. "How was your day?" Laura dropped her purse on the table and sat down across from David. "Busy, as usual." "I see you've been working late again." David nodded. "Yeah, a lot has been going on. But I need to talk to you about something important." Laura looked up, her expression shifting to one of curiosity mixed with concern. "What's it about?" David took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "It's about us. About our marriage. The truth is, the recent events have made me realize how unhappy I am with the way things have been." Laura's eyes widened slightly, and she leaned forward. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" David nodded slowly, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes. I've been thinking about it for a while now. We've both changed, and I don't think we're moving in the same direction anymore. It's not fair to either of us to keep pretending that everything is okay." Laura's face showed a mix of shock and resignation. She sat back, her hands clasped tightly. "I see. I suppose I've been feeling the same way. We've drifted apart, and it's been hard to ignore." David reached out, touching her hand gently. "I didn't want to hurt you, Laura. I just think it's time for us to face the truth. Maybe this is the best thing for both of us." Laura's eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and acceptance. "I suppose you're right. We've been living in a state of pretense for too long. It's time to make a change." The conversation was heavy but necessary. As they discussed the details of their separation, David felt a strange sense of relief. The decision to divorce was painful, but it also opened a door to new possibilities and personal growth. Meanwhile, David's commitment to Emma and Clara remained unwavering. His newfound clarity about his personal life allowed him to focus more on the positive aspects of his recent actions. He visited Emma and Grace regularly, offering support and help as Clara continued to recover at home. One afternoon, David arrived at Emma's house with a large bouquet of flowers and a box of homemade cookies. Emma greeted him with a warm smile, her eyes reflecting the genuine appreciation she felt. "Hi, David. These are beautiful," Emma said, accepting the flowers and cookies. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble." David smiled, his demeanor more relaxed and genuine than before. "I wanted to. It's a small token of appreciation for everything you and your grandmother have been through. How's Clara doing today?" Emma led David into the living room, where Grace was assisting Clara with some light exercises. She's making progress. It's slow, but we're seeing improvements. Grace looked up, her expression brightening at the sight of David. David, it's so nice to see you. We're grateful for all your support. Clara's mood has lifted since your last visit. David sat down, watching as Clara attempted a few gentle stretches with Emma's help. I'm just glad to see her improving. It's been a challenging time for all of us, but seeing Clara's recovery is a big relief. As the days went by, David found solace in his interactions with Emma and Grace. His own life was in a state of flux, but helping Clara and supporting Emma brought him a sense of purpose and fulfillment. The connection he had with them provided a welcome contrast to the complexities of his personal situation. One evening, as David prepared to leave after a visit, Emma approached him with a thoughtful expression. David, I wanted to ask, how are you holding up? I know you've been going through a lot lately. David smiled softly, his eyes reflecting a sense of calm. I'm managing. It's been a difficult transition, but I feel like I'm on the path to something better. Sometimes it takes a crisis to help us see what truly matters. Emma nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. I understand. I just want you to know that we're here for you too. You've been a great friend to us, and we appreciate everything you've done. David's heart warmed at her words. Thank you, Emma. Your support means a lot to me. I think we're all finding our way through these changes together. As David walked to his car, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The personal changes he was undergoing were challenging, but they were also paving the way for a new chapter in his life. His involvement with Emma and Clara had become a source of strength and clarity, guiding him through a time of personal transformation and growth. In this chapter, the focus shifts to David's personal life and his decision to confront the issues in his marriage. The dialogue between David and Laura reveals the depth of their problems and the impact of David's recent experiences on his personal choices. David's continued support for Emma and Clara highlights the positive aspects of his journey through this challenging period. In the months following the divorce, David embraced a newfound sense of freedom and purpose. His decision to part ways with Laura had been painful, but it also marked the beginning of a transformative period in his life. With his personal issues behind him, David focused on rebuilding his life and deepening his relationships with Emma and Clara. Emma and Clara had settled into a routine of recovery and adjustment. Clara's health had improved significantly, and she was regaining her strength with each passing day. Emma, now more hopeful and confident, was making strides in her own life as well. The financial strain had eased somewhat, thanks to David's ongoing support and the community's generosity. One sunny Saturday morning, David drove over to Emma's house, carrying a box of freshly baked pastries. He had decided to host a small celebration to mark Clara's continued recovery and to show his appreciation for Emma and Grace's resilience. As David arrived, Emma and Grace were busy setting up the backyard for a small garden brunch. The scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass filled the air. Emma spotted David pulling into the driveway and waved excitedly. David, you're here, Emma called out, running to greet him. We're just getting everything ready. Thank you for bringing those pastries. David smiled as he handed over the box. I thought it would be a nice touch for the celebration. How's Clara doing today? Emma's face lit up with a mix of pride and relief. She's doing great. We're seeing improvements every day. She's even started helping with the garden. David followed Emma into the backyard, where Grace was arranging plates and utensils on a table. Grace looked up, her eyes filled with gratitude. David, it's wonderful to see you. Your support has meant the world to us, Grace said, her voice warm. David shook his head, his expression sincere. I'm just glad to be here and to see Clara getting better. It's been an honor to help. As they set up for the brunch, Clara joined them, her movements slower but steady. She greeted David with a heartfelt smile. David, it's so nice to see you. I'm feeling much better now, Clara said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. David placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'm so happy to hear that. You've been incredibly strong through all of this." The garden brunch was a success, filled with laughter, delicious food, and heartfelt conversations. David, Emma, Clara, and Grace enjoyed each other's company, celebrating Clara's recovery and the bonds they had forged during this challenging time. Later that afternoon, as the guests began to leave, Emma and David found a quiet moment to talk. They sat on the edge of the garden, watching the sun set over the horizon. "David, I wanted to thank you for everything," Emma said softly. "Your support has made such a difference in our lives. I don't know how we would have managed without you." David looked at Emma, his eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and determination. "Emma, you and Clara have shown incredible strength. Helping you has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I feel like I've found a renewed sense of purpose through this journey." Emma nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I've been thinking a lot about our lives and how they've changed. I'm starting to pursue some new goals for myself. I want to make a difference, just like you did for us." David's eyes brightened with interest. "What kind of goals are you thinking about?" Emma smiled, her enthusiasm evident. "I've always wanted to work in healthcare, and now I'm considering going back to school to become a nurse. It feels like the right time to take that step." David's face lit up with admiration. "That sounds like a fantastic idea, Emma. I'm sure you'll make a great nurse. Your compassion and dedication are inspiring." Emma blushed slightly, her cheeks reddening. "Thank you, David. Your encouragement means a lot to me." As the sun dipped below the horizon, David and Emma continued to talk, sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. The conversation marked a turning point for both of them. David was reminded of the positive impact he could make in the world, and Emma felt more determined than ever to pursue her aspirations. Back at his own home, David began making concrete plans for his future. He decided to volunteer at local charities and mentor young professionals, finding new ways to give back to the community. The process of rebuilding his life was both challenging and fulfilling, and he was eager to embrace the opportunities that lay ahead. One evening, as David reviewed his calendar and future commitments, his phone rang. It was Emma. "Hi, David. I just wanted to let you know that I've enrolled in a nursing program," Emma said, her voice filled with excitement. David's face broke into a wide grin. "That's fantastic news, Emma. I'm so proud of you. I'm sure you're going to excel in your studies." Emma's laughter was infectious. "Thanks, David. I couldn't have done this without your support. I hope we can continue to stay in touch and share our progress." David nodded, feeling a sense of contentment. "Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing all the great things you'll achieve." As David hung up the phone, he reflected on the journey he had been through. The challenges he had faced and the relationships he had built had reshaped his life in profound ways. He was more determined than ever to live a life of purpose and connection, and he was grateful for the opportunities that had come his way. In this chapter, the focus shifts to the rebuilding of David, Emma, and Clara's lives. The dialogues between David and Emma, as well as David and Grace, highlight the positive changes and the supportive relationships that have developed. Emma's decision to pursue a career in healthcare signifies a new beginning for her, and David's commitment to giving back demonstrates his personal growth. The chapter underscores themes of renewal, purpose, and the impact of meaningful connections. As the first leaves of autumn began to fall, David, Emma, and Clara embarked on the next chapter of their lives. Clara had fully recovered and was now focusing on enjoying life with renewed energy. Emma was settling into her nursing program, and David was finding new ways to channel his energy and skills into meaningful endeavors. One crisp Saturday morning, David found himself at the local community center, where he had decided to start volunteering. The center was hosting a fundraiser for various local causes, and David was helping out with organizing and setting up. The atmosphere was vibrant, filled with people from different walks of life coming together for a common purpose. Emma, who had completed her first semester of nursing school with commendable results, had taken a break from her studies to join David at the fundraiser. Clara, now fully recovered, had offered to help at the event as well. The three of them were excited to contribute to the community that had supported them throughout their journey. As David and Emma worked side by side setting up tables and arranging decorations, Emma broke the comfortable silence between them. "David, I'm really enjoying the volunteering work we're doing here," Emma said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "It's amazing to see so many people coming together to support different causes." David looked over at Emma, his eyes reflecting his own satisfaction. "I agree. It's a great way to give back and make a tangible difference. I've found that being involved in the community helps me stay focused and motivated." Emma nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I've been thinking about how much has changed in my life. I never imagined I'd be where I am now, starting a new career, feeling more confident and hopeful than ever." David smiled warmly. "It's incredible to see how far you've come. You've worked hard to get here, and it's inspiring to see you embrace new challenges with such determination." As they continued to set up, Clara arrived, her presence bringing an additional sense of warmth and joy to the event. She joined David and Emma, chatting with them as they prepared for the fundraiser. The three of them shared stories and laughter, creating a sense of camaraderie that was both uplifting and reassuring. Later that day, the fundraiser kicked off with speeches, performances, and various activities. David was introduced as one of the key organizers, and his heartfelt speech about the importance of community support was met with applause. Emma and Clara, seated in the audience, watched proudly as David spoke. "Thank you all for coming and supporting our local causes," David said into the microphone, his voice resonant with emotion. "It's through acts of kindness and solidarity that we build stronger, more connected communities. I'm honored to be part of this and to contribute in whatever way I can." Emma leaned over to Clara, her eyes shining. David's speech was really touching. "He's found his calling in helping others." Clara nodded in agreement. "He has. And it's wonderful to see how he's made such a positive impact on all of our lives." As the event concluded, David, Emma, and Clara took a moment to reflect on the day's successes. They shared a quiet moment in the community center's garden, surrounded by the soft glow of evening lights. David turned to Emma and Clara, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about the future. I want to continue supporting and mentoring others, and I'm considering starting a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in healthcare." Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "That's a fantastic idea, David. It would make a huge difference for students who might not have the financial means to pursue their dreams." Clara nodded enthusiastically. "I think it's a wonderful way to honor the journey we've all been on, and to give back in a meaningful way." David smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I'm glad you both think so. I want to ensure that others have the same opportunities and support that we've had." The evening ended with a feeling of accomplishment and optimism. As they prepared to head home, Emma and David discussed their plans for the future, sharing their hopes and aspirations. "I'm excited about what's to come," Emma said, her voice filled with anticipation. "Between my studies and the opportunities for community involvement, I feel like I'm on the right path." David looked at Emma with encouragement. "You're doing great, Emma. I'm proud of everything you've achieved and excited to see where your journey takes you." As David drove home that night, he reflected on the changes in his life. The challenges he had faced and the people he had met had shaped him into someone who valued purpose and connection. His work with the community and his plans for the scholarship fund were just the beginning of a new chapter, filled with hope and promise. The story of David, Emma, and Clara was one of transformation and new beginnings. Their shared experiences had forged strong bonds and inspired them to make a difference in the world. The future was full of possibilities, and they were ready to embrace whatever came next with open hearts and determined spirits. In this chapter, the focus is on the positive outcomes and new opportunities that have emerged for David, Emma, and Clara. Their involvement in the community and their personal growth are highlighted through their conversations and actions. David's decision to start a scholarship fund symbolizes his commitment to giving back and supporting others, while Emma's excitement about her future reflects her own personal achievements and aspirations. The chapter underscores themes of renewal, purpose, and the impact of meaningful connections on shaping one's future.